Welcome to Interface Studies. My name is Saleh. Let's start with two ways of writing a thing down. The first is on a sticky note. Buy milk. Two words and you're done. You haven't said when or why or how important it is, and the note doesn't seem to mind. Now let's put the same thing into a proper productivity app. Let's think of Apple reminders. A box appears. Around it, quietly, there are a set of questions. Which project? What priority? When is it due? Any tags? You don't have to answer them, but the empty fields are just sitting there. And the empty field is a question. It arrives before you've finished having the thought itself. Now, that may seem like a small thing, but it is the first sign of a larger one. A productivity app is not just a list you keep on a screen instead of on paper. It is a bundle of trades. At every step, it gives up something the old way had in exchange for something the old way lacked. And you can read almost any of these apps by asking which trades it has made. Most of them have the same ones. A few have refused. This video is about that set of trades, what it costs to make them, and what it costs to refuse. Now you might ask why an app has to trade anything at all, why it cannot simply be a better version of the thing it replaced. The answer sits in an old argument about paper. In 2001, two researchers, Abigail Sellen and Richard Harper, published The Myth of the Paperless Office. People had spent decades promising that computers would do away with paper. The two of them measured what actually happened. In the organizations they studied, taking up email pushed paper use up, not down. The machine, meant to replace paper, made people print more. Their explanation is the thing this whole video rests on. Paper is not a worse screen. It affords things. Affordance, a term coined by the psychologist James Gibson in the 60s and then later Don Norman brought it into design, simply just means what an object lets you do. A handle affords pulling. A flat surface affords putting things down. Paper affords being spread across a desk, written on at any angle, held in two hands, taken in at a glance. No screen reproduces all of that. So when work moves off paper, it cannot carry every affordance across. It keeps the ones that turn into data and trades the rest away. This is why there is always a trade. The only question is which one. The first trade happens before you write a word. Underneath almost every task and notes app is the same shape. A list of items. And each item is a record with fields. The apps most open about it, like Notion, hand you a database directly. Every thought is a row, and a row has columns whether you fill them or not. A system like that does not force you to classify, but it leans on you to, because the structure is the point, and the structure wants feeding. So you can pick a type, a project, a priority, and the act of writing something down becomes the act of filing it. The trade is order in exchange for the freedom to not yet know what a thing is. And it is a choice, not a law. At the other end sit the capture-first tools, like Apple Notes, Drafts, or even the simple Sticky Notes app. You write now and sort later, or maybe never. Notion takes the order. They take the freedom. Same trade, opposite sides. The second trade is place, which I spoke about in my previous video. It hides inside a feature that looks like nothing but progress, which is views. The same records shown as a list, a board, a calendar, or sorted and filtered and rearranged as often as you like. Paper could never do that. But there's a cost folded into the word sort. On a desk, A thing had a location, whether you wanted to or not, and the location meant something. In a database, the default is that nothing sits still. Change the sort, and the dentist note that was near the top is now somewhere in the middle. It reflows. The field worked this out long ago. In 1983, Thomas Malone found that the mess on a desk was not mess. Where a thing sat told you how urgent it was. David Kirsch argued that arranging things in space is part of thinking, not its leftover. Then Offa Bergman and Steve Whitaker found that people refinding their own files often prefer to navigate back to a place rather than search for a word. Search answers, "What was it called?" It is worse at "Where did I leave it?" Now, software did not strictly abolish place. It made it optional. Spend enough time in Notion, and you can build a workspace that becomes a place. The dashboard you know by heart. The page always third in the sidebar. The catch here is what it takes. On paper, place comes free, and you could not switch it off. In software, you have to build it, maintain it, and resist the constant invitation to rearrange everything one more time. So the trade is not retrieval instead of place. It is place that arrived for free in exchange for place you have to keep making. The clearest sign of how rare free place has become is the tool nobody even calls a productivity app, which is the spreadsheet. B7 in a spreadsheet is always B7, and the grid holds still long enough to learn. The third trade you feel with productivity software specifically is guilt. A paper list got thrown away, and rewriting tomorrow's was a quiet act of deciding what still matters. The app throws nothing away. It archives. Nothing is ever quite gone, which sounds like a gift and behaves like a debt. The backlog that leaves you feeling permanently behind is not laziness. It is the natural shape of a container with no bottom. The trade is total recall in exchange for the edge that used to make you choose. The fourth trade we notice only when something breaks, and it is where the apps split most sharply. It is ownership. When your notes live in a cloud app, the company holds a real copy and you hold a view of it. That buys you genuine things. It syncs everywhere. It lets other people edit alongside you. It backs itself up. But, according to a famous research by Ink and Switch and their ideas of local first software, there was a warning. When the data lives on someone else's servers, you become a borrower of your work. And if the service shuts down or locks you out, the work can go with it. Which takes us to apps like Obsidian, which follows the file over app approach. According to Obsidian's philosophy, every app is eventually obsolete. So if you want what you make to last, it should be files you control, in a format anyone can read. Obsidian keeps your notes as plain text on your own disk. Notion keeps them as blocks in its cloud. Notion trades ownership for collaboration and polish. Obsidian trades collaboration and polish for ownership. Again, the same trade, opposite ends. And again, neither is simply right. So why do most apps land on the same side? The cloud, the database, the bottomless store. Part of it is history. The architecture is decades old. In apps like Borland Sidekick in 1984, Lotus Agenda. In 2001, though, David Allen gave us Getting Things Done and provided a philosophy. Capture everything. Get it out of your head and into a system you trust. Allen did not invent the machinery. He gave people a reason to use it. Also, part of that unified direction in productivity apps is the market itself. In a famous article, writer Will Manidas described tool-shaped objects, which are things built like tools that mostly produce the feeling of work, because the market for feeling productive is far larger than the market for being productive. A tool sold to that market will reward the part of you that enjoys arranging the system over the part that wanted the task done. The apps that refuse the trade, the local first, plain text crowd, are selling to a smaller market that wants control and longevity instead, and they may pay for it in convenience. There's an obvious objection to all this. People are mostly fine. Some love the Reminders app that came on their phone. Some build elaborate setups in Notion and enjoy every minute of it. The experience is personal, and it does not track how clever the design is. Two things to explain that. An affordance was never a rule. A missing one only costs you if you were doing the thing it supported, and a person with 5 chores and a person with 3 projects and 200 notes are not doing the same work. Also, almost nobody chooses a tool by auditing its traits. Herbert Simon had a word for that. It satisfies. We take the first option that is good enough and stop looking. The tie gets broken by habit, by what the team already uses, and by what a friend swears by. So the trade is real, and almost nobody chose it on purpose, which is exactly why the refusers matter. The person who still uses stickies is not less productive, or even the writer with a folder of plain text files. The Obsidian user who keeps everything local. They are proof that the trade is a choice and not a law. Although even there it creeps back. The elaborately configured Obsidian vaults, the amount of plugins installed. They can quietly turn the tool that refused the trade into one more system you tend instead of use. Let's keep all that in mind, because the newest layer makes the deepest version of the same trade. The agents. The pitch is simple. You can capture if you want, but you don't have to. It will capture. You will not triage. It will triage. At the far end, you will not even do the task. It will draft the email, do the reading, run the steps, and tell you when it is all done. What is interesting is that the field already had this argument a long time ago, in 1997. Ben Schneiderman and Patty Mays debated under the title Direct Manipulation versus Interface Agents. Back then, the understanding of an agent was different from now, but it was close. A piece of software that learned your preferences and took over a chore, filtering email, recommending music, booking a meeting. Some people remember the Clippy in Microsoft Word, which was its face. Schneiderman, who had argued his whole career for direct manipulation, for interfaces made of visible things you act on and watch respond, was wary. He worried about predictability, about control, and about being able to understand what the software had actually done, working while you did something else, working somewhere you were not. And his case was that the bill came due as a loss of visibility and control. Now, in 1997, that was mostly wishful. Now, it's real. An AI agent takes a vague instruction in plain words and acts across your applications while you're not watching. The agent comes back to you with a result. You cannot glance at it the way you glance at a desk. You cannot take hold of the thing and move it. You hand over a sentence and trust what comes back. So the agent is the far end of everything we've traced. The desk had visible objects, direct handling, a place to put them, your own hands on the work. Each layer since has given a little of that. The app took the place. The cloud took the ownership. The agent takes the handling and the visibility. It is the same access as file over app, one scale up. The earlier question was who holds your files. This one is who does your thinking. Now, it would be easy to call this a mistake, and it would be actually unfair. In the debate back then, Mays was right that not every task deserves your attention, and sometimes handing one off is the whole point. The question is about selecting and what are we willing to give away. In 1999, Eric Horvitz argued for a middle road. a mixed initiative system where the person and the machine take turns instead of replacing one another. This has to be built deep into the agent itself. The choice is not between good interfaces and bad ones. It is between different bills. Direct manipulation charges you attention in return for control. The agent takes the attention away and charges you visibility instead. Which one you would rather pay depends on the work in front of you. For 40 years, we have traded place for retrieval, ownership for convenience, and direct handling for delegation. Most apps made those trades by default, and a stubborn few refused them, which is the clearest proof that they were trades and not laws. The agent is the latest one on offer. What it asks for is not where our nodes live, but who does the thinking. And whether there is a trade worth making for everything is the part worth sitting with.